They would not let their mother be cast aside and forgotten. The news broke like a shockwave, rippling through the city's high society and reverberating through the desolate corners of a small, forgotten apartment. Liam, the brilliant and ruthless CEO of Innovate Tech, a man whose face graced the cover of every major business magazine, was getting married. The announcement, a lavish digital affair that flooded every social media feed, was a masterpiece of corporate elegance and calculated sentiment. Chloe and Caleb, the team's covert ops, were not to be left out. They had the crucial task of gathering physical intel. They spent their afternoons in the park, near Liam's office building, their innocent faces and playful antics a perfect cover. They would watch the comings and goings of the employees, taking note of the security guards, the delivery routes, and the times when the building was most vulnerable. Chloe, with her artistic eye, would sketch a detailed map of the building's ground floor, complete with the location of security cameras and access points. Caleb, the master of distraction, would create small diversions, a misplaced toy, a sudden game of tag to test the reactions of the security personnel. The bride-to-be was none other than Vanessa Sterling, a stunningly beautiful and equally sharp CEO of a rival firm. The narrative was a whirlwind romance, two titans of industry, brought together by fate and a shared vision. Their love story was the talk of the town, a modern-day fairy tale complete with pre-wedding photo shoots on private yachts, and an exclusive interview where Liam spoke of a future he had finally found. Their information, meticulously gathered, was fed back to Noah, who used it to refine his strategy. He created a detailed plan for how to get the most important piece of evidence, the physical files that Vanessa kept on a private server in her office. The digital proof was good, but a physical copy would be undeniable. But for Elena, the woman who had once lived that fairy tale, the news was a jagged shard of glass plunged directly into her heart. She sat on the worn floral couch in their cramped living room, the glow of the secondhand television casting a cold, flickering light on her face. Her hands, once soft from a life of leisure, were now calloused from a year of hard work, scrubbing floors and waiting tables just to keep a roof over her children's heads. The plan was audacious. They would have to find a way to bypass security, get to the server room, and copy the files to a USB drive. It was a mission that seemed impossible for 5 children, but their resolve was unbreakable. Her heart, however, was what ached the most. It wasn't the pain of a jealous ex-wife. It was the unbearable, suffocating pain of a betrayed soul. A year ago, her life was a beautiful, sun-drenched painting. She was the devoted wife of a loving, albeit work-obsessed, husband, and the mother of 5 incredible, brilliant children. They lived in a sprawling mansion with a backyard that felt like a private park. Every morning, Liam would leave for work with a kiss and a promise to return. And every evening, he would do so, exhausted but with a smile for his family. As the sun set, casting long shadows across their makeshift war room, the 5 children looked at each other. They had done the impossible. They had found the truth, a truth that had been buried for over a year. They had digital proof, strategic maps, and a plan. They were no longer just 5 children mourning the loss of their family. They were a team, a small army on a mission of justice. They knew their next move was the riskiest of all, a mission that would require them to step out of their apartment and into the world they had been exiled from. A world that was about to find out that a lie can only last for so long before 5 little geniuses bring it crashing down. Then the world shattered. The first step of their plan was to approach Mark, Liam's personal assistant, the inside man who had been betraying their father. The children knew they couldn't just walk up to him and present their findings. Mark, a shrewd and cautious man, would never believe them. They needed to communicate with him in a way that was discreet and could not be traced back to them. This was Mia's domain. It happened without warning. Liam came home one night, his eyes not filled with their usual warmth, but with a cold, hard glint she had never seen before. He had a stack of printed emails and photos in his hand, damning evidence, he claimed, of her betrayal. The words he spoke were not the loving whispers she was used to, but a barrage of accusations, each one a dagger. Using a secure, anonymous email account she had set up, Mia crafted a message. It was a cryptic email with no sender, no subject line, and a body of text that, to the untrained eye, would seem like a random string of numbers and letters, but to a tech-savvy person like Mark, it would be a puzzle, a coded message designed to pique his interest and, most importantly, his fear. "I can't believe I was so blind," he had said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You were just using me. The love, the children. It was all a lie. A way to get your hands on my fortune." The message read, Elena's frantic protests were met with a wall of stone. The man she had loved, the father of her children, saw her as a manipulative gold digger. He saw the photos of her with a close male friend, taken completely out of context, and the fabricated emails where she supposedly confessed her deceit. He believed every word, every lie. The truth? That these were the harmless conversations of a woman lonely and neglected by her workaholic husband was irrelevant to him. His grief and fury had been so carefully and expertly stoked. He couldn't see anything else. 11R823 Viridian 450K Marks payouts. Innovate Tech Viridian 0815 23,600K Innovate Tech Leak Synergy Solutions. The children. No truth is coming. Wedding day. He left. Just like that. No custody battle. No alimony. No goodbyes. He simply cut them off. The mansion, the cars, the bank accounts all gone in a single, devastating moment. Elena was left with nothing but her children and the clothes on their backs. The fairy tale had not just ended. It had been violently ripped apart, its pages scattered to the wind. The code was simple: a series of data points, the dates and amounts of the payouts, the names of the companies involved, and a chilling warning. The last 3 lines were the most important. The children know. Truth is coming. Wedding day. It was a direct threat, a silent hand on his shoulder that whispered, "We know what you did, and your time is running out." Now, sitting here, watching him on the screen, a new woman on his arm, a different narrative being told, a fresh wave of despair washed over her. Vanessa, with her perfect smile and perfectly tailored suit, held his hand as if she owned it. Liam looked happy, more relaxed than Elena had ever seen him. The man on the screen, so full of life and light, was a stranger to the cold, distant figure who had thrown her out of his life. It was a testament to the power of a lie so well told that it could reshape a person's reality. Mia sent the email from a public Wi-Fi hotspot, making sure to erase all traces of her presence. The children waited, a tense silence hanging over their war room. They had taken a shot in the dark, a desperate gamble that Mark would be smart enough to understand the message and terrified enough to do something about it. A small and choked sob escaped Elena's lips. She felt a deep, agonizing loneliness. She had tried to reach out to him, to explain, to fight for her family, but Liam had surrounded himself with a fortress of lawyers and security, a wall she couldn't penetrate. Her calls were blocked, her messages unanswered. She was erased, a ghost from a past he had apparently decided was better forgotten. The next day, Mark's face on the news was a telling sign. He was visibly pale and shaky, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of profound anxiety. He had received the message. The puzzle had been solved, and he was now in a state of quiet panic. The sound of the front door opening and closing brought her back to the present. Her 5 children, returning from school, entered the tiny apartment. They were her whole world. The reason she fought so hard every single day. This was Noah's moment to shine. He had been monitoring Mark's online behavior. He noticed that after receiving the email, Mark's internet searches became frantic. He was searching for terms like untraceable digital transactions, legal defenses for corporate espionage, and how to delete data from a private server. It was all the confirmation they needed. There was Mia, 10 years old, with her mother's sharp mind and an innate understanding of technology. She was the family's quiet rock, a little hacker in the making who could troubleshoot any device with a few keystrokes. Then came Noah, 8, with a brilliant strategic mind that could rival a chess grandmaster. He saw the world in patterns and probabilities, always one step ahead. The mischievous twins, 6-year-old Chloe and Caleb, were a whirlwind of energy and creativity. Chloe was an artist with a penchant for disguises, and Caleb was a master of distraction, a tiny whirlwind of chaos with a heart of gold. And finally, there was Leo, 4 years old, the youngest and most empathetic of the bunch. He was the emotional center of their small family, his wide, innocent eyes able to melt any heart. Noah, the master strategist, knew exactly what to do next. They had to create a distraction, a way for Chloe and Caleb to get close to Mark without arousing suspicion. He devised a plan that was as simple as it was brilliant. The children would approach Mark at a public park, where he often went for his lunch break. Chloe, with her artistic talent, would pretend to be a street artist, drawing a caricature of Mark that was unflatteringly accurate. Caleb, with his mastery of distraction, would orchestrate a small chaos, causing a minor scene that would draw Mark's attention. They saw their mother, sitting in the dark, tears streaming down her face. They didn't need words. They had seen the news too. Their school friends, their teachers, even the strangers on the street were talking about it. Liam's wedding was a public spectacle, and his family's pain was a private one. The plan was set. They gathered their tools, Chloe's sketchbook, and a box of crayons, Caleb's loudest toy truck, and Leo, the secret weapon, who was dressed in a tiny superhero costume Chloe had made for him. "Mom," Mia said, her voice soft but firm. She gently took the remote and turned off the TV, plunging the room into comfortable darkness. She knew the media circus was only a year-long assault of gossip and speculation, and Liam's wedding was just the climax of it all. Don't cry. He's not worth it. The next day, as Mark sat on a park bench, his mind a whirlwind of fear and desperation, Chloe and Caleb put their plan into action. Chloe sat on the grass a few feet away, sketching furiously. Caleb, meanwhile, ran his toy truck into a nearby flower bed, causing a small but loud disturbance. The truck was a gift from their father, and Caleb used it as his war tool. Elena looked at her eldest daughter, her heart breaking all over again. Mia had been forced to grow up too fast. All of them had. She knew they had endured the same pain, the same loss, and the same confusion as she had. Yet, here they were, being the brave ones for her. Mark, startled by the noise, looked up from his phone, his eyes landing on Chloe. Her face, a mask of concentration, was focused on her sketchbook. Curious, he walked over to her. As he peered over her shoulder, he saw a remarkably detailed drawing of himself, with a horrified look on his face, the very expression he was currently wearing. "I'm so sorry. Babies," Elena whispered, pulling them all into a tight, desperate hug. "I failed you. I couldn't protect you. How did you—" he started to ask, his voice a whisper. "You didn't fail us, Mom," Noah said, his small hand patting her back. "He failed us. He failed to see who you really are." His words, so full of adult wisdom, were a poignant reminder of the brilliant minds trapped in their small bodies. Just then, Leo, their secret weapon, ran up to him, his little face full of innocence. "Are you a superhero, Mr.?" he asked, his voice a sweet, innocent melody. "My sister drew you, and my brother crashed his truck for you." As they sat there, a small huddle of a family in a small, lonely apartment, a shared resolve began to form. The children, huddled close to their mother, were not just feeling pain. They were feeling a deep, righteous anger. They had lost their father, their home, their security. They had seen their mother, once a beacon of joy and warmth, turn into a shadow of herself. Mark, completely thrown off guard, looked at the 5 little children in front of him. He saw Mia, standing a few feet away, watching him with an unnerving calm. He saw Noah, his eyes calculating, watching his every move. He saw Chloe, who had captured his fear with a few strokes of a crayon. And he saw Caleb, who had created a small chaos just for him. They had been a broken family for too long. They had grieved in silence for a year. But now, with the news of a wedding, of a woman who had taken their place and they suspected had taken their father, something shifted within them. A silent, unspoken agreement passed between the 5 of them. A fierce promise forged in the darkness of that small room. But it was Leo's question that broke through his facade. "Are you a superhero?" It echoed in his mind. He was no superhero. He was a coward, a traitor who had sold out a good man and his family for a few $1,000,000. He looked at the children, their faces a mirror of the family he had helped destroy. And a wave of shame washed over him. He was a monster, and he had been outsmarted by 5 children. They would not let this stand. What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. They would not let their father marry a woman who was a lie. "The truth," Noah said, his voice clear and firm. "We want you to tell Dad the truth. Everything." They were 5 small, brilliant minds, each a tiny piece of the father they had lost and the mother they loved. They had been underestimated, forgotten, and cast aside. But in their tiny apartment, surrounded by their mother's quiet sorrow, they made a pact. They would use their genius, their shared love, and their unbreakable bond to fight for the one person who had never given up on them. Or what Mark said, trying to regain his composure. They were 5 little geniuses, and they were about to bring their mother to a wedding to crash it. Not just for revenge, but for truth, for justice, and for the family they had lost. The shattered fairy tale was about to become a battleground, and these 5 children were ready for war. Mia stepped forward, her small voice a sharp contrast to the gravity of her words. Or we'll make sure everyone knows what you did. We'll release the files, the transfers, everything, and when you go to jail, you'll be a hero. Not to us, but to the people who will take everything from you. The news broke like a shockwave, rippling through the city's high society and reverberating through the desolate corners of a small, forgotten apartment. Liam, the brilliant and ruthless CEO of Innovate Tech, a man whose face graced the cover of every major business magazine, was getting married. The announcement, a lavish digital affair that flooded every social media feed, was a masterpiece of corporate elegance and calculated sentiment. Mark looked at the children, their eyes filled with a righteous fury that a year of hardship could not erase. He was staring at a force of nature, a force he had underestimated. He knew he was trapped. He could either come clean and save himself, or he could go down with Vanessa, taking the fall for a crime he had helped commit. He looked at the drawing of himself, a reflection of his own fear, and he knew his choice was already made. The bride-to-be was none other than Vanessa Sterling, a stunningly beautiful and equally sharp CEO of a rival firm. The narrative was a whirlwind romance, 2 titans of industry, brought together by fate and a shared vision. Their love story was the talk of the town, a modern-day fairy tale complete with pre-wedding photo shoots on private yachts and an exclusive interview where Liam spoke of a future he had finally found. The children had done it. They had found their inside man. They had a plan. They had the proof. And now they had a witness. The truth, like a slow-moving freight train, was now on its way, and it was headed straight for the grand wedding of Liam and Vanessa. But for Elena, the woman who had once lived that fairy tale, the news was a jagged shard of glass plunged directly into her heart. She sat on the worn floral couch in their cramped living room, the glow of the secondhand television casting a cold, flickering light on her face. Her hands, once soft from a life of leisure, were now calloused from a year of hard work, scrubbing floors and waiting tables just to keep a roof over her children's heads. Mark was not a bad man. He was a weak man, a man who had let greed and fear cloud his judgment. When he looked into the eyes of his 5 children, filled with anger and pain, he realized that he was no longer a character in Vanessa's game, but a traitor to the family he had loved. Mia's words had sunk deep into his heart. When you go to prison, you will be a hero. But not to us, to those who will take everything from you. He did not want to be anyone's pawn. Her heart, however, was what ached the most. It wasn't the pain of a jealous ex-wife. It was the unbearable, suffocating pain of a betrayed soul. A year ago, her life was a beautiful, sun-drenched painting. She was the devoted wife of a loving, albeit work-obsessed, husband and the mother of 5 incredible, brilliant children. They lived in a sprawling mansion with a backyard that felt like a private park. Every morning, Liam would leave for work with a kiss and a promise to return, and every evening, he would do so, exhausted but with a smile for his family. That night, Mark called Liam, but Liam did not answer. The call was then blocked. He knew that Vanessa had set a trap to isolate Liam from everyone he had ever trusted, but he could not give up. He contacted Liam's children on a disposable phone, just to say one sentence, "I have everything. Come see me." Then the world shattered. The meeting was at a small coffee shop, far from the city center. The 5 children sat around a round table, waiting. When Mark emerged, he looked haggard and scared. He placed a USB drive on the table. "It's all in there," he said, his voice shaking. "The fake emails, the money transfers, the evidence that Vanessa set up your mom. It happened without warning." Liam came home one night, his eyes not filled with their usual warmth, but with a cold, hard glint she had never seen before. He had a stack of printed emails and photos in his hand, damning evidence. He claimed of her betrayal. The words he spoke were not the loving whispers she was used to, but a barrage of accusations, each one a dagger. Mia quickly plugged the USB drive into her laptop. Her eyes scanned the files, her expression turning cold. She used a proxy account to control Dad's business decisions. Mia said, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. Decisions that seemed harmless but were secretly undermining Innovate Tech. I can't believe I was so blind, he had said, his voice devoid of emotion. You were just using me. The love, the children. It was all a lie, a way to get your hands on my fortune. Noah, who had been monitoring Mark's transactions, nodded. She's planning to take over Dad's company. He said, this wedding is the final step in her plan. Elena's frantic protests were met with a wall of stone. The man she had loved, the father of her children, saw her as a manipulative gold digger. He saw the photos of her with a close male friend, taken completely out of context, and the fabricated emails where she supposedly confessed her deceit. He believed every word, every lie. The truth, that these were the harmless conversations of a woman lonely and neglected by her workaholic husband, was irrelevant to him. His grief and fury had been so carefully and expertly stoked, he couldn't see anything else. Mark bowed his head, not daring to meet their eyes. I was wrong. I let her deceive me, he whispered. I helped her destroy a family. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'll do anything to make it right. He left. Just like that. No custody battle, no alimony, no goodbyes. He simply cut them off. The mansion, the cars, the bank accounts all gone in a single, devastating moment. Elena was left with nothing but her children and the clothes on their backs. The fairy tale had not just ended. It had been violently ripped apart, its pages scattered to the wind. It was time to talk to Mom. Back at the apartment, the 5 children gathered. Their emotions were mixed, partly relieved, partly worried. They had done this in secret, protecting their mother from further pain. But now, with the evidence in hand, they couldn't keep it a secret any longer. Elena sat on the sofa, exhausted from a long day, looking at the children with loving eyes. Now, sitting here, watching him on the screen, a new woman on his arm, a different narrative being told. A fresh wave of despair washed over her. Vanessa, with her perfect smile and perfectly tailored suit, held his hand as if she owned it. Liam looked happy, more relaxed than Elena had ever seen him. The man on the screen, so full of life and light, was a stranger to the cold, distant figure who had thrown her out of his life. It was a testament to the power of a lie so well told that it could reshape a person's reality. Mom, Mia began, her voice shaking. There's something we have to tell you. A small, choked sob escaped Elena's lips. She felt a deep, agonizing loneliness. She had tried to reach out to him, to explain, to fight for her family. But Liam had surrounded himself with a fortress of lawyers and security, a wall she couldn't penetrate. Her calls were blocked, her messages unanswered. She was erased, a ghost from a past he had apparently decided was better forgotten. Noah put the laptop on the table. When Elena saw the photos of her, the fake emails, and the suspicious money transfers, she gasped. Tears welled up again, but this time not from the pain, but from the truth being revealed. She looked at each of her children, her eyes wide with surprise. How do you know all this? She asked, her voice filled with shock. The sound of the front door opening and closing brought her back to the present. Her 5 children, returning from school, entered the tiny apartment. They were her whole world. The reason she fought so hard every single day. The 5 children told her everything about the war room, about Mia's hacking into the system, about Noah's strategizing, and about the time they framed Mark. Elena listened in silence, feeling as if a curtain had been pulled back, revealing the terrifying truth behind the collapse of her marriage. But beyond the pain and anger, a stronger feeling arose: pride in her children, who had done what she, as an adult, had failed to do. There was Mia, 10 years old, with her mother's sharp mind and an innate understanding of technology. She was the family's quiet rock, a little hacker in the making who could troubleshoot any device with a few keystrokes. Then came Noah, 8, with a brilliant strategic mind that could rival a chess grandmaster. He saw the world in patterns and probabilities, always one step ahead. The mischievous twins, 6-year-old Chloe and Caleb, were a whirlwind of energy and creativity. Chloe was an artist with a penchant for disguises, and Caleb was a master of distraction. A tiny whirlwind of chaos with a heart of gold. And finally, there was Leo, 4 years old, the youngest and most empathetic of the bunch. He was the emotional center of their small family, his wide, innocent eyes able to melt any heart. "So what do we do now?" Elena asked, her eyes filled with determination. "We can't let her do this. We have to tell your father." They saw their mother, sitting in the dark, tears streaming down her face. They didn't need words. They had seen the news too. Their school friends, their teachers, even the strangers on the street were talking about it. Liam's wedding was a public spectacle, and his family's pain was a private one. "Yes," Noah said, "but he's isolated. We have to make him believe us, right at the wedding." "Mom," Mia said, her voice soft but firm. She gently took the remote and turned off the TV, plunging the room into comfortable darkness. She knew the media circus was only a year-long assault of gossip and speculation, and Liam's wedding was just the climax of it all. Don't cry, he's not worth it. The plan began to take shape. Mark, now fully on their side, would help them get the wedding invitations and map out the venue. Chloe, with her makeup skills, would make the family look indistinguishable enough to blend in with the crowd, and not immediately recognizable. Caleb would create a distraction at just the right moment, and Leo would use his cuteness to get close to Dad. Mia would be in charge of projecting the evidence onto the big screen during the reception. Elena looked at her eldest daughter, her heart breaking all over again. Mia had been forced to grow up too fast. All of them had. She knew they had endured the same pain, the same loss, and the same confusion as she had. Yet, here they were, being the brave ones for her. The night before the wedding, they prepared for the final battle. Elena had regained her strength. She was no longer the weak, broken woman on the sofa. Standing among her 5 children, she was a warrior, a mother ready to fight to get her family back. She had lost everything a year ago, and she would not let that happen again. They looked at each other, a family more united than ever, facing a war that could only end with the truth. "I'm so sorry, babies," Elena whispered, pulling them all into a tight, desperate hug. "I failed you. I couldn't protect you." The day of the wedding arrived, cloaked in a rare, golden sunlight. The city's most opulent ballroom had been transformed into a floral wonderland, a symphony of white roses and shimmering crystal. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low murmur of high society. A 4-piece orchestra played a soft, classical melody, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. "You didn't fail us, Mom," Noah said, his small hand patting her back. "He failed us. He failed to see who you really are." His words, so full of adult wisdom, were a poignant reminder of the brilliant minds trapped in their small bodies. Liam stood at the altar, looking every bit the successful CEO. He was dressed in a custom-tailored tuxedo, his face a picture of serene happiness. He was a man who believed he was starting over, finally shedding the burdens of a past he saw as a lie. By his side stood Vanessa, radiant in a designer wedding gown that must have cost a fortune. She was smiling, her eyes fixed on Liam, but a cold, calculating gleam lay beneath the surface. This was her victory lap, her final triumph. As they sat there, a small huddle of a family in a small, lonely apartment, a shared resolve began to form. The children, huddled close to their mother, were not just feeling pain, they were feeling a deep, righteous anger. They had lost their father, their home, their security. They had seen their mother, once a beacon of joy and warmth, turn into a shadow of herself. In the midst of the glittering crowd, a small, unassuming family slipped in. They were dressed in plain, slightly ill-fitting clothes. Chloe's clever handiwork with a few old outfits. They looked like a young family attending a distant relative's wedding, easily overlooked in the sea of designer gowns and bespoke suits. Mark, pale and nervous, met them at the door and gave them a quick, furtive nod, confirming he had done his part. He had managed to get them 4 invitations, claiming they were for his extended family. The 5th, for Elena, was a risk they were willing to take. She wore a simple black dress, a ghost in a sea of color, her face a mask of quiet determination. They had been a broken family for too long. They had grieved in silence for a year. But now, with the news of a wedding, of a woman who had taken their place and, they suspected, had taken their father, something shifted within them. A silent, unspoken agreement passed between the 5 of them. A fierce promise forged in the darkness of that small room. Mia, the digital warrior, carried a small backpack with a laptop and a discreetly hidden USB drive. Noah, the strategist, was the lookout, his eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. Chloe and Caleb, the covert ops, held hands, their innocent faces a perfect cover for their real mission. And Leo, the secret weapon, was in Elena's arms, his wide, innocent eyes full of a love that was about to become their greatest weapon. They would not let this stand. The plan was audacious. They would wait until the vows, the most emotionally charged moment of the ceremony, to strike. Noah had calculated the exact moment of maximum impact. As the priest began to speak, the music softened, and all eyes were on Liam and Vanessa. This was it. They would not let their father marry a woman who was a lie. Chloe and Caleb, with a shared glance, began their diversion. Chloe, with an innocent-looking sob, tripped and fell to the ground, her face a picture of exaggerated distress. Caleb, her loyal twin, immediately let out a loud, wailing cry. Running to her side, the commotion, small as it was, drew a few curious glances from the nearest guests. The children were masters of their craft. They would not let their mother be cast aside and forgotten. As the small chaos unfolded, Leo, the youngest, wiggled out of Elena's arms. He ran straight for the altar, his small feet pattering across the marble floor. "Daddy!" he cried, his small voice echoing in the cavernous ballroom. They were 5 small, brilliant minds, each a tiny piece of the father they had lost and the mother they loved. They had been underestimated, forgotten, and cast aside. But in their tiny apartment, surrounded by their mother's quiet sorrow, they made a pact. They would use their genius, their shared love, and their unbreakable bond to fight for the one person who had never given up on them. Liam, startled, turned around. His face, once serene, was now a mask of pure shock. He saw Leo, a boy he had not seen in a year, and his heart, so carefully guarded, clenched with a pain he had tried to forget. He took a step forward, his mind reeling. They were 5 little geniuses, and they were about to bring their mother to a wedding to crash it, not just for revenge, but for truth, for justice, and for the family they had lost. The shattered fairy tale was about to become a battleground, and these 5 children were ready for war. In that moment of distraction, Mia made her move. She had been hiding near the AV booth, her laptop connected to a hidden port Mark had told them about. With a few swift keystrokes, she took control of the main projection screen. The classical music died, replaced by a sudden, jarring silence. All eyes, which had been on Leo and Liam, now turned to the screen. The corporate predator. Vanessa Sterling stood on the penthouse balcony, a flute of champagne in her hand, watching the city lights glitter below. The world saw a woman at the pinnacle of success, a self-made entrepreneur with a formidable intellect and a captivating smile. She had been a media darling since she founded her tech firm, a company that was always a step behind Innovate Tech, always a contender, but never the champion. Now, she was about to merge her life with Liam, and in doing so, gain a foothold that would finally put her at the top. What flashed on the screen was not a beautiful slideshow of Liam and Vanessa's love story. It was a document, a forged email from a year ago, supposedly from Elena, confessing her love for another man. Then a series of photos of Elena and her friend, taken completely out of context. The guests gasped. The whirlwind romance with Liam was a narrative she had meticulously crafted. Every public appearance, every shared photo, every carefully worded interview was a piece of a masterfully executed plan. But the real story began a year and a half ago, long before she had ever met Liam. But Mia wasn't finished. The screen changed again, showing a series of untraceable transactions from Viridian Enterprises to Mark's private account. The dates and times were highlighted, coinciding with a series of business decisions that had slowly eroded Innovate Tech's power. Then a chilling message appeared on the screen. Vanessa Sterling, corporate predator. The truth is here. Vanessa had been a young, ambitious executive at a struggling tech firm when she first encountered Liam. He was already a legend, a visionary who had built Innovate Tech from a garage startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. She had been a nameless face in the crowd, watching him from a distance, her admiration quickly curdling into envy. She coveted not just his success, but his power, his influence, and the sheer, unassailable confidence with which he commanded a room. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Gasps and whispers filled the air. Liam, a man of logic and reason, stood frozen, his mind desperately trying to make sense of the digital proof unfolding before him. He looked at Vanessa, his loving partner, her face now a mask of pure fury and terror. He looked at Mark, his personal assistant, standing pale and shaky in the corner. Then he looked at Leo, the small boy who had called him Daddy, and finally, at Elena, who was standing a few feet away, her eyes filled with a grief and betrayal he now understood. Her opportunity came unexpectedly. Liam's father, the former CEO and a man Liam deeply admired, passed away suddenly. The loss sent Liam into a spiral of grief. He buried himself in work, becoming even more distant and emotionally closed off than usual. He grew paranoid, convinced that everyone around him, including his own family, was after his wealth. This was the chink in his armor, the vulnerability Vanessa had been waiting for. "Liam?" Vanessa hissed, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "It's a lie. It's them. They're trying to ruin us." She started by cultivating a relationship with Liam's closest confidant and personal assistant, a man named Mark, who, unknown to Liam, was deeply indebted to Vanessa due to a series of bad investments. Using Mark, Vanessa began to plant seeds of doubt in Liam's mind about Elena. She painted Elena as a cunning, opportunistic woman who had entrapped him with 5 children and was now biding her time to make her move. But her words were poison, and Liam was finally immune. The pieces of the puzzle, so expertly hidden by Vanessa, had been unearthed by his children. He saw the truth in their faces, in their unwavering belief in their mother. He saw the lie in Vanessa's terrified eyes. The narrative was so subtle, so insidious, that it burrowed deep into Liam's subconscious. He started seeing everything through a filter of suspicion. A loving look from Elena became a calculated performance. Her concerns about his long working hours became a complaint about his lack of attention to her. It was a slow, psychological torture designed to fracture the foundation of their marriage. "Tell him." Mark, Noah's voice, small but firm, cut through the noise. "Tell him what you did." The final blow was a meticulously orchestrated frame-up. With Mark's help, Vanessa hired a private investigator to follow Elena, capturing photos of her meeting with a male friend, a harmless get-together that was twisted to look like a clandestine affair. They also forged a series of damning emails, using a sophisticated deepfake algorithm to mimic Elena's writing style and a fake email account to make it look like she was corresponding with a divorce lawyer about Liam's fortune. Mark, with a deep, shaky breath, stepped forward, his voice, once a quiet whisper, now boomed with a new resolve. He confessed everything, detailing Vanessa's plot, his role in the deception, and how he had finally been convinced to come clean by the children. The moment Liam confronted Elena, Vanessa was waiting in the wings. She appeared as a sympathetic colleague, a beacon of rationality and understanding in his moment of emotional turmoil. She listened to his grief, validated his suspicions, and gently nudged him towards a separation. Her seemingly selfless support made her appear as his only true ally, the only person who understood the burdens of his success and the treachery of those closest to him. The truth had arrived, not in a gentle wave, but in a crashing, unyielding torrent. Liam, a man who had built an empire on logic and data, finally saw the truth that his children had found. He looked at Elena, the mother of his children, the woman he had so carelessly discarded, and saw not a traitor, but a victim. He looked at Vanessa, the woman he was about to marry, and saw not a lover, but a predator. The wedding was over. The game, for Vanessa, was lost. She moved in quickly, seamlessly integrating herself into his life. She took over the small details he had neglected, from managing his social calendar to even choosing his suits. She became the silent partner in his life, the soothing presence he craved. The children, whom she saw as obstacles, were subtly pushed aside. She spoke of the importance of an unburdened life for a man of his stature, the need for him to focus on his legacy without the distractions of a chaotic family. Her words, so soft and reasonable on the surface, were poison. The elegant ballroom, which had moments ago been a stage for a fairy tale, now resembled a crime scene. A stunned silence followed Mark's confession, a quiet so profound that you could hear the soft sniffle of a child in the crowd. The guests, once a glittering sea of polite society, stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and morbid curiosity. With Liam's mind and heart under her control, Vanessa began to execute the second phase of her plan, the corporate takeover. She secretly funneled company secrets to a rival firm she had a controlling interest in. She made strategic business decisions that, while appearing to benefit Innovate Tech, were in fact weakening it from within. She was a corporate predator, and Liam was her prey, a vulnerable genius who had become an easy target due to his emotional state. The wedding was not the culmination of a love story. It was the final, public step in a long, carefully planned hostile takeover, a public declaration of her victory. Vanessa, no longer the poised and radiant bride, was a woman on the verge of unraveling. Her face, once a perfect mask of serene happiness, was contorted with fury. "You liar!" she shrieked at Mark, her voice cutting through the silence. "You traitorous dog! This is all a fabrication. He's working with them to ruin me." She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at Elena and her children, her eyes wild. "They're a family of grifters. Liam, don't listen to them." Vanessa smiled, a cold, calculating curve of her lips. She had done it. She had taken Liam's love, his family, and soon, she would take his empire. The city lights below twinkled like a million diamonds, and she was the one who was about to own them all. She raised her glass in a silent toast to herself. The game was won. Little did she know, 5 small, brilliant players had just entered the game, and they were about to change the rules. But her words were hollow, a desperate performance to an audience that had already seen the truth. Liam's gaze, once full of a love he had believed to be genuine, was now a cold, piercing glare of betrayal. He was a CEO, a man who built an empire on data and evidence, and the evidence, meticulously presented by his 10-year-old daughter, was undeniable. The living room had been transformed. The worn floral couch and the secondhand television were pushed against the wall, making way for a makeshift war room. A worn-out rug became the central command, scattered with old notebooks, crayons, and a repurposed whiteboard made from a large piece of cardboard. In the dim light of a single lamp, the 5 children, a team forged in hardship, gathered for their first official meeting. He didn't look at Vanessa. He looked at his children. He looked at Leo, still standing near the altar, a small, brave figure in a suit Chloe had made. He looked at Chloe and Caleb, still holding hands, their faces streaked with tears. He looked at Mia and Noah, standing by their mother, their faces a picture of triumph and relief. And finally, he looked at Elena, a woman he had thrown away, a woman who had been right all along. Mia, the eldest, sat with a laptop propped on a stack of encyclopedias. Her fingers danced across the keyboard with a speed that belied her 10 years. A pair of glasses, too big for her face, rested on her nose, reflecting the glow of the screen. She was the team's tech expert, a self-taught hacker who had learned to navigate the digital world as a way to escape the harsh reality of their new life. While other children were playing video games, Mia was dissecting their code, understanding their back-end infrastructure, and learning to bend the rules of the internet to her will. She had already managed to create a secure, encrypted messaging app for the family, a digital fortress that their mother couldn't even breach. The shame was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket that settled over his heart. He saw the pain in her eyes, a pain he had inflicted. He saw the strength in her posture, a strength she had found in the face of his abandonment. He had been a fool, a vulnerable man consumed by grief who had been preyed upon by a masterful predator. Noah, 8, sat opposite her, his expression a mask of intense concentration. He was the strategist, the mind that saw the chess moves in every situation. He wasn't flashy or loud. His genius lay in his quiet ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. He was the one who had first pieced together the timeline of their father's abandonment and Vanessa's sudden appearance. He understood that this wasn't an act of a heartbroken man, but a carefully planned assault. His notebook was filled with intricate diagrams, flowcharts detailing Vanessa's every public move, and a list of her known associates. To Noah, this wasn't a family drama. It was a hostile takeover, and he was ready to mount a defense. Liam took a step away from Vanessa, a chasm opening between them. It was a silent, public declaration of the end. He walked towards his family, each step a difficult, agonizing journey. The crowd parted for him, a river of humanity giving way to the man they all knew had been a victim of a cruel, public lie. The twins, Chloe and Caleb, were a vibrant splash of color in the otherwise somber room. 6 years old, they were the team's covert operatives. the masters of disguise and distraction. Chloe, with a mischievous glint in her eyes, was an artist. She could draw a picture-perfect rendition of anyone she saw, and her skills extended to makeup and costume design. She had once used her crayons to turn a simple white t-shirt into a convincing superhero costume. Complete with a logo that would rival any comic book character, her twin, Caleb, was the master of distraction. With a simple, innocent giggle and a well-timed stumble, he could divert attention from anything, a skill they had perfected during their year of hardship, often using it to help their mother navigate crowded spaces. They were the team's wild cards, the element of surprise. He knelt down, a powerful CEO brought to his knees by his smallest child. "Leo," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his hand reaching out. Leo, the little boy who had yearned for his father, threw himself into Liam's arms, a small cry of "Daddy!" escaping his lips. Liam held him tight, a year of lost hugs and whispered goodnights pouring out of him in that single embrace. And then there was Leo, 4 years old. The youngest of the bunch, he was a silent observer, his big, innocent eyes taking in every detail. He wasn't a hacker or a strategist, but he possessed a different kind of genius, the genius of pure, unadulterated charm. He was the team's secret weapon, a little boy who could win over anyone with a simple hug and a sweet smile. His small voice, full of innocent wonder, was a key that could unlock any door, a secret passage into the hearts of even the most hardened adults. Mia, the eldest, stepped forward, her eyes challenging him. "We have more proof." "Dad," she said, her voice small but firm. "We have her bank accounts, her secret company, and her whole plan to take over Innovate Tech." Mia, now deep in the rabbit hole of Vanessa's server, found a series of encrypted files marked Mark's Payouts. It was the smoking gun. The files detailed a series of large, untraceable transactions, from Viridian Enterprises to Mark's private accounts. They were payments for consulting services. But Mia's digital forensics revealed that the dates and times of the payments perfectly coincided with a series of suspicious business decisions Liam had made that had, in retrospect, subtly but effectively weakened Innovate Tech. "It's all in the laptop," Noah added, his strategic mind still in overdrive. "We can get it back for you." "Okay, team," Noah began, his voice surprisingly authoritative for an 8-year-old. "We know Vanessa is a bad lady. She made Dad leave us, and now she's going to marry him and take his company." Liam looked at his children, at their brilliant minds and their fierce loyalty, and a wave of profound love and pride washed over him. He had been a fool to think he had been betrayed by them. He had been betrayed by the one he had chosen to replace them. "She's a corporate predator," Mia added, her eyes narrowing as she pulled up a file on her laptop. "Her company is called Synergy Solutions, but I found a bunch of hidden files in their system. She's been siphoning off data from Innovate Tech for months, through a proxy account." He stood up, still holding Leo in his arms, and faced Vanessa. "It's over. Vanessa," he said, his voice now a steely calm, the voice of a CEO in a boardroom, not a heartbroken groom. "Your game is finished. The police have been called. The truth is out. You're going to pay for what you've done, not just to me, but to my family." A proxy, what Chloe asked, braiding Caleb's hair into a messy ponytail. Vanessa's face, a mask of pure hate, melted into a look of fear. She was cornered. Her carefully constructed facade had come crashing down, and she had nothing left to hide behind. She looked at the crowd, at the journalists who were now furiously taking notes, and she knew her reign was over. She had won the game, but she had lost the war. "A fake person," Mia explained simply. "She's using a fake person to steal from Dad. We need to find out who the real person is, and we need proof that she set it all up." Liam then turned to Elena. He didn't speak. He simply opened his arms, a silent, desperate plea for forgiveness. Elena, who had loved him fiercely and then grieved his loss, saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. She saw not the CEO who had abandoned her, but the man she had married, the father of her children. "And we need to tell Dad the truth," Noah added, tapping his pencil against his notebook. "We have to show him that Mom wasn't lying, and that Vanessa is—" She walked into his embrace, her 5 children surrounding them. It was not a grand, romantic moment like the one Vanessa had planned. It was a quiet, broken reunion, a family shattered by a lie, but now united by the truth. In the middle of the opulent ballroom, surrounded by the wreckage of a failed wedding. A family was finally, painfully, and beautifully put back together. The real work of healing was just beginning, but for the first time in a year, they were facing it together. The opulent ballroom emptied out in a rush of whispering guests and flashing cameras. The police, their presence a stark contrast to the luxurious decor, took Vanessa away in handcuffs, her face a portrait of cold, bitter rage. Mark, his hands also cuffed, looked at the family and offered a final, tearful apology before he, too, was let out. The crowd dissipated, leaving only the family, the police, and the lingering wreckage of a shattered fairy tale. "How do we get the proof?" Caleb asked, his tiny voice a mix of excitement and fear. Liam, still holding Leo, looked at his family. "Let's go," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. He led them through the back entrance, a silent, unified procession. He didn't take them to the mansion he had shared with Vanessa. He took them to a quiet, discreet hotel suite he kept for late nights at the office. It was a neutral ground, a place where they could finally begin to talk without the ghosts of the past or the pressures of the public eye. "We need to get into her systems," Mia said, "but her main files are on a private server, a physical one, in her office." Once inside, Liam set Leo down, and the full weight of the last year crashed down on him. He sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, the image of his children in their tiny apartment, Elena's pain, and the memory of his cold words all flashing through his mind. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I was a fool, a complete and utter fool." A silent gasp went through the room. Breaking into a physical location was a whole different level of danger. Their mother, who had no idea of their secret club, would never allow it. The apartment, a sanctuary from the world's cruelties, felt a million miles away from the high-stakes corporate world they were about to infiltrate. Elena sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his back. She didn't have to say anything. Her presence was enough. She had loved this man, and her heart had broken for a year. But now, seeing his remorse, a part of her began to heal. "What happened, Liam?" she asked softly. "Why did you believe her?" "I can get in," Chloe said, her voice small but determined. "I can make us look like the janitor's kids. No one ever looks at the janitor's kids." Liam lifted his head, his eyes red. He explained it all, from the moment his father died, the grief that had made him paranoid, to Vanessa's subtle manipulations and Mark's betrayal. He described the forged emails, the out-of-context photos, and the way Vanessa had presented herself as his only ally. He confessed his shame, his guilt, and the profound blindness that had allowed him to destroy his family. "And I can distract them," Caleb chimed in, doing a clumsy somersault on the rug. "Watch me." Mia and Noah huddled together on the floor, listened in silence. They had seen the digital evidence, but hearing their father admit his mistake, to see him so vulnerable, was a different kind of truth. "She was siphoning funds from Innovate Tech," Mia said, her voice small. "She was trying to weaken the company from within." Noah shook his head. "It's too risky. We need a different plan. We need an inside man." Liam nodded, his face a grim mask. "I know. The police have the files. They'll handle it. But that's not what's important. What's important is you. All of you. I left you in the dark. I didn't listen. I let my grief and my anger turn me into a monster." He looked at Elena, his eyes full of a new, fierce resolve. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Elena, I know it's going to take a long time. I want to come home. I want to be a family again." "Mark," Mia said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Dad's assistant. I found a bunch of suspicious transfers from Vanessa's accounts to his." The children, seeing their father's sincerity, moved in closer. Leo, tired from the day's events, crawled into his lap. Chloe and Caleb, no longer the masters of disguise, simply wanted to be close to their father. And Mia and Noah, the brilliant minds that had brought him back, just wanted their old life back. "He's the inside man," Noah said, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "He must be working for her. We can get him to get the proof for us." Elena looked at her children, at their weary, hopeful faces. She looked at Liam, the man who had hurt her so deeply, but who was now, finally, seeing the truth. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. There was a year of pain and struggle to unpack, a year of distrust and anger to overcome. But as she looked at her family, now reunited in a small, quiet hotel room, she knew that for the first time in a year, they were truly home. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. The fairy tale was over, but the real story, the messy, painful, and ultimately beautiful story of a family healing, was just beginning. Months later, life returns to normal, but not completely. It is a new beginning, a dawn after the storm. The family has returned to the old mansion, but the space is no longer cold and distant. Every corner of the house is filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of love. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and completely crazy. But these weren't ordinary children. They were 5 little geniuses, fueled by a year of silent suffering and a fierce love for their mother. They were about to take on a corporate predator, an entire world that had forgotten them, and the one person who had been tricked into betraying them all. The war had just begun, and the first battle would be to find a way to get the evidence they needed to save their family. Vanessa Sterling and Mark have been convicted. The evidence Mia collected, along with Mark's testimony, exposed the entire scheme to take over Innovate Tech and the elaborate fraud. Vanessa's company went bankrupt, and she faces a long sentence. Mark, because he cooperated, had his sentence reduced but still had to pay the price for his mistakes. The war room became their world. For the next few weeks, the children lived and breathed their mission. Their schoolwork was completed with a new, fierce efficiency, freeing up their afternoons for their clandestine operation. Homework was done, and then the real work began. Liam has returned to work as CEO of Innovate Tech. He works harder than ever, not only for the company, but also for his family. He realized that true success was not about big contracts or numbers in the press, but about being present in the lives of the people he loved. He spent his evenings at home, helping his children with their homework, and his weekends were spent on family outings. Mia, the brilliant digital architect of the group, was at the heart of it all. She sat hunched over her laptop, a glowing extension of her mind, a quiet sentinel in the digital darkness. Her task was to unravel the tangled web of Vanessa Sterling's online life. Vanessa, a master of public image, had a flawless digital presence. Her social media was a curated gallery of success, elegance, and philanthropy. Her public emails were a testament to her business acumen. But Mia knew that behind every pristine facade, there was a hidden back door. The love between Liam and Elena could not be restored overnight. The wounds were still there, but they learned to heal together. Elena went back to work, not for the money, but because she wanted to find herself again. She found a teaching job at a university where she could share her knowledge and passion. She and Liam talked often, listened to each other, and rebuilt the trust that had been broken, using skills she had acquired from countless hours of tinkering. Mia began her digital dig. She started with the public records of Synergy Solutions, Vanessa's company. She found buried corporate filings, a list of board members, and a network of subsidiary companies that seemed to exist only on paper. It was a labyrinth of shell corporations. And Mia, with the help of Noah's strategic mind, began to map it out. As for the 5 children, they no longer needed to play the role of warriors. Mia was still a tech genius, but she used it to develop a learning app for her peers. Noah is still the strategist, but he applies it to complex chess games and math competitions. Chloe and Caleb, the 2 hyperactive kids, are still artists and troublemakers, but their antics now bring laughter to the family. And Leo, the youngest, is still the heart of the family, always ready to run to hug his parents. "It's like a spider web," Noah said, pointing to Mia's screen. "The center is Synergy Solutions, but the threads all lead to other companies. Look at this one. Viridian Enterprises. It's registered in the Cayman Islands. That's where they hide money." One evening, Liam, Elena, and their 5 children sat together on the back lawn. Looking up at the stars, Liam turned to Elena and took her hand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I hurt you, but I promise to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Mia nodded, her fingers flying. She was trying to find a link between Viridian Enterprises and Vanessa herself, a digital breadcrumb that would lead them to the truth. She hacked into the public directory of the Cayman Islands, a tedious process that required her to bypass a series of firewalls. Hours turned into days, and finally, she founded a single, overlooked email address used to register Viridian Enterprises. It was not in Vanessa's name, but it was linked to her private server. Elena squeezed his hand, smiling indulgently. "We have each other, Liam," she said. "And that's all that matters." "Gotcha," Mia whispered, a triumphant smirk on her face. This was her first real lead. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, it was a real ending, full of pain and hardship. But it was a beautiful ending, a story of love, forgiveness, and the strength of a family that was torn apart but found its way back together, stronger than ever. A new life had begun, and they were ready to face it together. Meanwhile, Noah, the strategist, was working on the other side of the puzzle. He was obsessed with Mark, Liam's personal assistant. He had been studying Mark's social media, his public photos, and his online behavior. He noticed a pattern. Mark, a man who once drove a modest sedan, was now driving a luxury sports car. His online posts, once filled with photos of his modest apartment, were now taken in lavish restaurants and five-star hotels. "He's been paid off," Noah declared, showing his siblings a side-by-side comparison of Mark's old life and his new one. "It's too much of a coincidence. The money has to be coming from somewhere,